Lawyers. When did a rich client think they'd win, but karma crushed them instead? I wasn't fresh out of law school when this case landed on my desk, but I was still young enough to think justice always wins if you fight hard enough. I was wrong. Justice needs help. Sometimes it needs patience. And sometimes karma steps in swinging. This case started with a name. Harlan Pritchard. If you're in corporate law, you know that name. If you're not, imagine the love child of Gordon Gekko and Elon Musk with none of the charm. He made his billions in real estate, then tripled it in private equity. He owned newspapers, politicians, even a private island where he threw networking parties that sounded a lot like softcore eyes wide shut gatherings. He walked into our firm with a smile like a vulture, wore cufflinks worth more than my car. His cologne gave me a headache. He wasn't our client yet. That was my boss's client. I was just the junior associate assigned to assist. Here's what you'll do, my boss said. You'll sit in, listen, take notes. Don't speak unless asked. I said, okay. But what I heard in that first meeting made it impossible to stay quiet. Harlan was being sued for wrongful termination, discrimination, breach of contract, and retaliation. The plaintiff? One of his former housekeepers, Maria Fuentes. She says I made her clean my boat in the dead of winter and fired her for mouthing off. I gave that woman a salary triple what she's worth. Now she wants what, $6 million? He laughed, loud and smug. She's a maid. A goddamn maid. Tell me we're not even entertaining this. I waited for someone in the room to say something. They didn't. I made the mistake of blinking. Who the hell is that? Harlan said, pointing at me. My associate, my boss said flatly. Cute. She speak? I do, I said before I could stop myself. That turned some heads. My boss looked like I slapped him in the face with a binder. Harlan smirked. Well, go ahead, associate. Let's hear what you think. So I said it. I think if you keep talking like that on the record, you're going to lose this case before it starts. The room went silent. My boss gave me a look that screamed, you're done. But Harlan didn't snap. He laughed. She's got teeth, he said. Fine, let her do the depositions. Maybe she'll scare the maid off. And that's how I got thrown into the lion's den. No one expected me to win. They expected me to bury Maria under pressure. But Maria wasn't what they expected either. She was calm, composed, dignified in a way I didn't understand until later. She had dates, names, times, receipts. She described being made to work 14-hour days with no breaks, denied food, and once locked in the pool house during a fundraiser because her uniform was too visible. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was testifying like she already knew how the story would end. She had evidence, too. Hidden body cam footage of Harlan berating her, timestamps matching payroll adjustments, even screenshots from the security system showing her mopping blood from a broken wine glass in the middle of the night after Harlan's drunk networking guests shattered it and laughed. I brought it all back to the office. My boss didn't blink. Bury it. We'll settle. But Harlan wasn't having it. Settle? Hell no. I don't lose to peasants. He refused every offer we made. Instead, he countersued Maria for defamation. And then, just to make it more grotesque, he dragged her daughter into it, claimed she stole items from the estate, filed police reports, got her temporarily expelled from her high school. It was meant to scare them. It did something else entirely. Maria found new counsel, a pro bono powerhouse firm with zero fear and a hunger for blood. They filed a class action on behalf of 3 other former house staff who had also been terminated under suspicious conditions. Suddenly, we weren't looking at $6 million. We were staring down 25+ punitive damages. My boss told me to dig. Find dirt on Maria. I refused. He replaced me on the team. But I wasn't done. I had kept copies of the deposition tapes, and one of them had a clip, barely audible at first, where Harlan, off camera, laughs and says, "Tell her I'll hire a new one next week. Maybe this time I'll find one who doesn't cry when I correct her." It wasn't a smoking gun, but it smelled like smoke. I slipped that clip, anonymously, to Maria's new legal team. 3 days later, subpoenas started flying. And Harlan laughed. Let them dig. I pay people to scrub my messes. He was right. At first, NDAS, deleted records, intimidation tactics. His lawyers dragged the proceedings out for months, until one document slipped through the cracks. A wire transfer, $75,000, from one of Harlan's shell companies to a former employee, dated 1 week after she was fired. The memo line said only, "for silence." It unraveled everything. That wire transfer cracked Harlan's invincibility like a hairline fracture in marble. Subtle at first, but devastating once pressure hit. The $75,000 payment wasn't illegal by itself, but it raised a very specific question. What was Maria being paid to stay silent about? When pressed in her follow-up deposition, the former employee who received the money, Letitia, lawyered up fast and invoked the fifth. Maria's team filed a motion to compel discovery into Harlan's private transactions with all former household staff. Suddenly, it wasn't just about wrongful termination. It was about a possible pattern of hush money. Our firm tried to stop the bleeding. Emergency motions. Protective orders. Pleas to the judge that it was outside the scope of the original suit. But the judge, a no-nonsense federal appointee with a reputation for hating grandstanding, allowed limited discovery, citing a credible suggestion of systemic suppression. The press caught wind. I remember the headline like a punch to the chest. Billionaire real estate mogul accused of silencing immigrant staff with payouts. Harlan didn't panic. He boasted, "I've been sued more times than I can count. I built my empire on court wins. This is just Tuesday." But this wasn't Tuesday. This was karma in slow motion. The plaintiffs multiplied. Two more former workers came forward, one with a handwritten journal, the other with an iPhone backup of messages between house managers trying to cover up abuse. Harlan's team called it hearsay and fabricated, but the dates aligned with security logs. And the journal? It documented a miscarriage after the employee slipped on an icy walkway she'd been ordered to shovel during a snowstorm. The entry was dated one day before her termination. Even our own junior team started turning on the case. One paralegal quit. Another left an anonymous complaint in HR. I didn't go to law school to help monsters. I kept my distance officially, but I watched it unfold like a slow burn. Maria's daughter, Isabel, got reinstated at school after an apology from the principal. The police quietly dropped the theft charges. Harlan was forced to retract his statements through a carefully worded press release that said absolutely nothing, and yet somehow admitted everything. Then came the hearing that changed everything. Maria's team filed for a preliminary injunction to freeze some of Harlan's non-liquid assets, citing an active risk of fraudulent transfers. Our side tried to laugh it off. Harlan was present that day, in a Navy suit, watching like the courtroom was his personal theater. The judge wasn't impressed. She asked for explanations about a recent property restructuring in the Caymans. Our lead attorney stuttered through an excuse about estate planning. Then, Maria's counsel dropped the hammer. A notarized letter from one of Harlan's financial advisors, recently fired, stating he'd been instructed to move assets discreetly in anticipation of a losing verdict. The courtroom went silent. Then the judge, without raising her voice, said, "That sounds a lot like obstruction." She granted the freeze. Harlan's smug smile cracked. That night, I heard shouting in the conference room. My boss came out red-faced. He's threatening to fire us unless we sue her lawyers for defamation. But it was too late. The media blitz exploded. Former staffers were interviewed. Hashtags popped up. Even a few celebrities who'd attended Harlan's charity galas tried to distance themselves. And then, karma struck harder than anyone expected. An investigative journalist dug up something buried deep, a private civil settlement from 2008 involving Harlan and a live-in nanny. The file had been sealed. But the name on the complaint? Maria Fuentes. It turned out this wasn't her first time confronting Harlan. 17 years earlier, she'd accused him of sexual harassment. The complaint was buried, and she was paid off. Under duress, her legal team argued. Harlan thought it was over back then. But Maria never forgot. And now she was back. Not for revenge, for accountability. I remember the email Maria's attorney sent to ours after that revelation became public. "You should have advised your client better." Now he's not just facing a civil suit. He's facing a movement. If Harlan Pritchard had taken even a fraction of responsibility back then, this wouldn't have become a national scandal. But narcissists don't retreat. They escalate. After the 2008 harassment settlement was exposed, Harlan tried a different tack: distraction. He staged a press conference claiming he was being targeted by political operatives, that Maria's lawsuit was a smear campaign funded by radical activists. He doubled down on victimhood, tears, trembling voice, the whole performance. But then came the leak. An anonymous source, I had a good idea who, provided Maria's legal team with a complete audio file of a private strategy meeting Harlan held 2 weeks earlier. In it, you could hear him say, "If I lose to a housemaid, I might as well burn the whole empire down." The tone wasn't fear. It was contempt. It sounded unhinged. The file went viral. The comment section under the news articles transformed from debate to unified disgust. Even neutral observers started asking why someone so rich, so powerful, and so innocent, would go to such lengths to shut down a cleaning lady with receipts. And receipts she had. Her legal team filed a motion to unseal 2 other settlements that had been quietly buried by Harlan's legal machinery over the last 15 years. This time, a former private nurse and a chef. Both women had left his estate with golden parachute payouts and confidentiality clauses, both alleged behavior ranging from verbal abuse to sexual misconduct. Harlan's lawyers argued breach of contract. The women argued duress. The court let it through. The dam broke. More women. More stories. Each time Harlan tried to outmaneuver them, with money, threats, deflections, it backfired. His defense team fractured under the pressure. One of the junior partners at our firm walked out during a deposition. She left her bar card on the conference table. By this point, I was no longer on the case, but I couldn't look away. The news cycle labeled it the billionaire downfall. It was everywhere. Cable TV, podcasts, even late-night comedy sketches. But in the court, it was still war. Harlan had hired a new, out-of-state firm that specialized in reputation recovery. They were arrogant, sloppy. They also underestimated her daughter, Isabel. Isabel, barely 18, sat through every day of testimony. She'd become something of a symbol for resilience. She never raised her voice, never cried publicly, just watched. One day, during a recess, I saw her reviewing documents alongside Maria's lead counsel. She was studying. And then, she testified. Not just as a character witness, but as a digital archivist. Turns out, Isabel had been quietly compiling every email, every message, every schedule update her mother had received while working for Harlan, including instructions that directly contradicted what Harlan claimed in his own testimony. She had metadata. She had GPS pings. She had security log timestamps scraped from backup files Harlan's team didn't even know still existed. Her presentation in court was surgical. The courtroom fell into a stunned silence when she pulled up a security video dated December 12th, showing Maria being berated in the snow for failing to clean Harlan's boat properly. Harlan had previously sworn, under oath, that Maria had never been asked to work outside during winter. The moment the footage ended, Harlan's lawyer asked for a recess. The judge said no. I watched from the gallery. The jury watched Isabel like she was the only person in the room who told the truth. And then came Harlan's mistake. He took the stand again. Against his counsel's advice. He rambled. He smirked. He referred to Maria as that woman. He said Isabel was clearly coached. Then the opposing counsel asked a simple question. Did you or did you not order Ms. Fuentes to clean an outdoor boat deck in sub-zero temperatures? And Harlan said, I don't micromanage cleaning staff. If they can't handle a little cold, they shouldn't work for a man like me. The air was sucked out of the room. He had admitted it. Not just the act, but the mindset. That single sentence made it into every news clip for the next week. By the time closing arguments came, there wasn't much suspense left. Maria's team didn't lean into rage. They leaned into dignity. They reminded the jury this wasn't about money. It was about power, about a man who thought money insulated him from morality. And Harlan? He just stared, arms crossed, jaw clenched, still believing that somehow he'd win. The verdict wasn't quick. It took the jury 5 full days to deliberate. That wait nearly broke Harlan. I wasn't part of the team anymore, but a friend inside the firm told me he showed up every morning looking like he hadn't slept. No more flashy suits. No more jokes. Just silence, sunglasses, and whispers with lawyers who had clearly lost faith in him. I was sitting at home when I got the call. Verdict's in. I drove to the courthouse like my tires were on fire. I wasn't sure why I was so invested, maybe because it felt personal. I'd grown up with women like Maria. My aunt used to clean rich people's houses. My mother used to iron their curtains. Watching someone like Harlan get dragged into the real world felt like justice reaching through generations. The courtroom was full when I arrived. Press, former staffers, law students, people who had no personal connection to the case but wanted to see what karma looked like in a courtroom. The jury filed in, faces blank. Foreman held the paper like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The judge asked for the verdict. We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Maria Fuentes. There was no gasp. Just one loud exhale from someone in the gallery, like they'd been holding their breath for months. The damages? $11.4 million. But that wasn't even the real blow. The jury had also found Harlan personally liable for punitive damages, the kind meant to punish, not just compensate. The judge turned to the jury. Do you wish to recommend a punitive amount? The foreman nodded. He read from the paper, $25 million. It wasn't the highest punitive sum ever awarded, but it might have been the most symbolic. 50 people stood outside the courthouse when Harlan left. Some yelled. Some just stared. Reporters shoved microphones at his face. He said nothing. Not a word. He got into a waiting car that peeled off before the door fully closed. Maria didn't celebrate in front of cameras. She walked out holding Isabel's hand. Her lawyer gave a short statement. Then they disappeared. No parties, no speeches. Just peace. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. See, when you lose a civil suit that big, you either pay or appeal. Harlan? He did something worse. He tried to hide. He moved money, liquidated assets, claimed financial hardship, declared multiple shell corporations bankrupt within 30 days. Maria's legal team responded immediately, filed motions, froze accounts, opened inquiries with the IRS. But it was Isabel who cracked it wide open. She'd gotten into college. Full ride. Journalism major. She didn't just want to move on. She wanted to investigate. And she did. On her own, she started tracking Harlan's asset trail. She used open-source tools, shell registry databases, even cryptocurrency ledgers. Then she published a blog. The first post was titled, How Billionaires Hide from Justice, a case study. She didn't name Harlan directly, but it was him. She laid out how real estate assets were shuffled across holding companies, how offshore trusts in Panama linked back to defunct LLCs in Delaware, and how a luxury yacht had been sold to a buyer who didn't exist. It went viral in a week. Even law professors started citing it. News outlets picked it up. One called it The Revenge of a Maid's Daughter. And with all that heat, someone from inside Harlan's finance team flipped. They submitted documents anonymously to Maria's attorneys. Ledgers, emails, even instructions with Harlan's digital signature. The IRS opened a file. Then the DOJ. That's when Harlan stopped being a story and started being a target. Federal investigators raided 2 of his offices. A grand jury was convened. Multiple former employees were subpoenaed. The man who once laughed at lawsuits was now begging his attorneys to cut deals behind closed doors. He was no longer fighting Maria. He was fighting the United States government. By the time the feds came knocking, Harlan Pritchard wasn't the billionaire mogul strutting into courtrooms with tailored suits and arrogance. He was a cornered animal, paranoid, defensive, and bleeding money from every angle. His legal team tried to contain the explosion, but there was no putting the lid back on. The charges started small. Tax evasion, fraudulent transfer of assets, wire fraud. But every time investigators dug deeper, more rot was uncovered. Phony charitable donations, offshore trust schemes, falsified payrolls for ghost employees who never existed. It was financial cancer spreading through every part of his empire. The irony? If he'd just paid Maria what she deserved or settled quietly, none of this would have come to light. But narcissists don't believe in accountability. They believe in control. And control was the first thing he lost. The Department of Justice froze his remaining USC assets. 3 of his properties were seized under civil forfeiture. His private jet was impounded due to customs irregularities. And his beloved Cayman Island villa? Turns out it had been purchased through a straw buyer, who flipped on him immediately. I'll never forget the footage of his arrest. It wasn't dramatic, no helicopters or raid jackets, just 2 agents in windbreakers knocking at his door in Connecticut, cuffing him without a word as he stood barefoot in a luxury bathrobe. The man who once told the press, "I eat lawsuits for breakfast," was now being perp-walked past his own Bentley. Maria didn't celebrate public. She issued a single statement. Justice isn't vengeance. It's truth, in full view. For every woman who was told to be quiet, this is for you. But Isabel stood outside the courthouse steps, alone, and read a prepared statement that was later played on every major network. My mother once told me, when people show you who they are, believe them. Harlan Pritchard showed the world who he was every day. He believed no one would care. We proved otherwise. She ended with a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. Justice cannot be for one side alone, but must be for both. That clip became the defining moment of the saga. But it wasn't quite over. See, there was one more layer of karma to unfold. One so fitting, it almost felt written by a screenwriter. After being denied bail and placed under house arrest, Harlan tried to do what he always did. Manipulate. He began threatening former allies behind the scenes. Business partners, offshore trustees, even family members. He used burner phones, had people deliver handwritten notes, tried to sell assets under the table using proxies. And the person who finally brought it all crashing down? His own son, Julian Pritchard, 28, disillusioned with his father and tired of the fear that followed their name, walked into a federal office and handed over everything. Bank access, emails, voicemails, private recordings from years of growing up under Harlan's iron grip. He didn't do it for immunity. He did it for his mother. Because, as it turned out, Julian's mother, Harlan's first wife, had also been a silent victim. She'd signed an airtight prenup years ago and was cut off entirely after the divorce. Harlan humiliated her in the tabloids, buried her with legal fees, and told people she was unstable. Julian never forgot. He had recordings, letters, even a journal his mother kept during the marriage. And now it all came flooding back. The DOJ added charges: witness intimidation, attempted obstruction, more financial fraud. And then came the final nail: a RICO case, racketeering, a charge built not just to punish but to dismantle. RICO meant they could go after the whole empire. Every business Harlan ever touched, every shell company, every complicit executive. They didn't just want to punish the man. They wanted to erase the empire. I remember watching the press conference where the U.S. Attorney General stood at a podium and said, "No amount of money should place anyone above the law. This is not just about theft. It's about power without conscience." And today, that ends. I thought about Maria, about that first moment she walked into a deposition room, calm and silent, while everyone underestimated her. And now here we were. Harlan Pritchard, once untouchable, now facing 117 years in federal prison. The trial that followed was less a legal proceeding and more a public autopsy of arrogance. Federal court, cameras banned, but the gallery was packed. Journalists, former employees, law students, and the occasional celebrity who once posed with Harlan at fundraisers, now watching from the shadows like ghosts of reputation past. I wasn't officially involved anymore, but I attended when I could. I didn't go to see Harlan suffer. I went to see Maria win. The prosecution built their case like a machine. Logical, merciless, methodical. They brought in forensic accountants, ex-assistants, even a retired IT tech who explained how Harlan had ordered hard drives wiped for privacy hours after subpoenas were issued. A paper trail revealed more than fraud. It revealed intent. He didn't just cut corners. He built a maze of lies, then dared the world to find its way through. At one point, a prosecutor held up a stack of documents over 3 inches thick. All of these were created to hide the fact that he didn't want to pay his housekeeper severance. That was the moment I realized something chilling. This entire empire, these fake charities, shell companies, fake invoices, rigged appraisals, started because of one woman refusing to be disposable. Maria didn't testify in the criminal trial. She didn't need to. Her words were already carved into the record. Her image had become something greater than one voice. She was the reason half of the legal system knew Harlan's name in disgust. But Isabel did return. This time she testified not just as a witness but as an expert. During the months after the civil trial, she'd interned at a digital law firm. She'd trained in open source intelligence, OSINT. She came to court with spreadsheets, diagrams, and records the FBI had overlooked. Her calm, factual testimony dismantled a defense argument that claimed Harlan wasn't aware of certain financial manipulations. Isabel simply displayed a screen recording of Harlan logging into the Swiss dashboard himself and initiating a wire transfer labeled funeral flowers to a bank that didn't exist. Even the judge leaned forward. Harlan's attorneys objected. The judge overruled. The jury watched Isabel like she was the final nail in the coffin. And then came sentencing day. It was a gray morning. Rain tapped on the windows like the world was holding its breath. Harlan showed up in a suit that didn't fit quite right. Maybe it was borrowed. Maybe his tailor had testified too. He didn't look at anyone as he entered the courtroom. Not the press. Not the jury. Not his son. Julian sat alone on the opposite side, head high. The judge read the charges one by one. With each one, the weight grew heavier. Wire fraud, tax evasion, racketeering, witness tampering, obstruction, perjury, conspiracy to defraud the United States. When she finally delivered the sentence, 65 years without parole, there was no applause. Just silence. The kind that feels holy. She looked at Harlan and said, "You believed the law was something that could be bought, like everything else in your life. But the law is not for sale. Today, you are not powerful. You are accountable." Harlan didn't speak, didn't cry. He simply nodded, slowly, as if realizing for the first time in his life that he was finished. He was led away in cuffs. No appeal, no smirk, no deal. Just a hollow man in a wrinkled suit walking into a cage he built himself. A year later, Maria finally spoke again. This time at a university lecture Isabel invited her to. The auditorium was full. Students, lawyers, even some from our old firm. Maria wore simple clothes. No makeup, no flair. She took the stage and said, "I used to think people like me didn't get justice. That courts were for the rich, and the rest of us were just stories no one believed. But justice isn't just a system. It's a choice. Every person who listened, every person who believed me, chose to make justice real. And I'm grateful." Someone in the crowd asked what she did with the money. She smiled. "I donated most of it, opened a legal aid clinic, hired 3 women full-time to help immigrant workers navigate contracts. The rest, I used to buy a little house with a garden. I grow mint now." The crowd applauded. And Isabel? She became one of the most promising investigative journalists in the country. Her blog was picked up by a major outlet. Her piece on legal loopholes in domestic labor law changed legislation in 3 states. One voice led to another, and another, until even the powerful learned, you can only outrun the truth for so long.